Exactly. But when you're printing money to buy things, and there's that money's backed by nothing, well, prices are going to keep going up. And foreigners have been financing this debt. China and Japan have been financing this debt. And instead of telling the truth, this is what's interesting. Bernanke, the Fed chairman, appears before Congress, and they ask him for his view on the state of the economy. And they ask him all these questions on the economy. Here, the one thing that Bernanke never talked about was money supply, or the two things, was money supply and interest rates. Instead, they talk about productivity and capacity utilization at factories, and they talk about what's happening in the housing market. But the one thing he never said was what his expectations were for interest rate policy, and he never talked about why the U.S. dollar is shrinking in value. And as long as Congress is spending more money than it takes in, well, the price of goods and services are going to rise until we hit the point that no more debt can be taken on. And that's what we've hit right now. It's a concept I call peak credit. The amount of credit in the system has hit its end. Banks lent money for people to buy homes. Anyone that could fog a mirror could buy a home. Prices levitated until everyone was sucked in. After that, we've seen the crash. Wall Street made its billions and trillions of dollars that it passed out to the upper echelon top people at these banks and brokerages. They walked away with millions, billions actually. Mazzillo, CEO of Countrywide Financial, made $1 billion on Countrywide Financial, running the company in stock options. Meanwhile, share price of Countrywide Financial, $5. Where else can you make $1 billion running the company into the ground? That's the sad state of what's happened to our economy. The little guys got the shaft. The people that got in late in the game, as what happens with any Ponzi scheme, and that's what housing was. To keep the housing bubble going, lending standards fell and fell and fell. We went from 20% down payments to 10 to 5 to 0. And it actually went to less than 0 because the home builders were actually lending down payments to people to buy a house. It all crashed. We're on the backside of that now, and the people that were hurt most were those that got in late in the game. All the financial bigwigs that got in early and got their money out early are still sitting pretty.
Now, let me make sure I understand. When we look at what are the basics of a sound economy and then where we went wrong, we have a group like, well, first of all, we have a currency that's not backed on anything tangible, so then it's subject to tampering and abuse by selected individuals who know how to do it. We have a Federal Reserve, which, contrary to most Americans' understanding, is not a federal agency. It's a very limited number of people with a huge amount of influence over us. And although they speak to Congress, they're largely unaccountable to them. And then we have government agencies who are supposed to be watchdogs, or other groups that are watchdogs over credit or other things, who are asleep on the wheel or even in collusion.
Well, yeah.
And at the meantime, the average citizen is completely asleep at the wheel and is assuming the government is looking after them and making sure everything's on the up and up, and doesn't even use the simple common sense they use when they go to buy a used car,
exactly.
with how their money's handled. So is it sort of a sum total of all those kind of things that have gotten us where we are?
Absolutely, it is a sum total of all those things. But you mentioned a point, and I wanted to touch on that more, and that's on the Fed. The Fed sets the price of interest. The market pretty much has to go along, but there's a lot of leeway in there that the Fed has, especially at times. and Greenspan slashed interest rates all the way down to 1%. And that was done in the wake of the dot-com bust. And the reason why he did it was he wanted to bail out his banking buddies, who at the time were in hock to all the dot-com companies, and they couldn't be paid back. All of them were going bankrupt. Meanwhile, banks had also lent a lot of money to Argentina and Brazil and third world countries. That debt was being reneged on. So in an effort to reinflate the banks, Bernanke slashed interest rates to 1%, literally to bail out the banks. That created a big housing bubble. And that housing bubble, now, I think it's the mother of all bubbles. I think that housing imploded. I don't believe that there can be another big bubble. And that's the problem that Bernanke is facing. Bernanke is trying to do the same thing. He wants to reinflate, just like what Greenspan did. But it's very difficult to do because housing provided jobs. Now, it also provided a lot of malinvestment. It provided overbuilding of commercial real estate, of restaurants, of Walmarts. We don't need any more Walmarts. We don't need any more Pizza Huts. We don't need any more Lowe's or Home Depots.
What about nail salons? Do we need nail salons?
Or no White Castle?
No.
No White
More
Castle.
stores than we possibly can need. I don't know if you saw this today. Bennigan's bankrupt.
Yeah,
Boom.
saw that.
Overnight. Chapter 7. 300 Bennigan's across the United States are closing. Someone emailed me today and said, well, Mish, you're missing this picture. Bennigan's was a lousy run company. Their food wasn't really that good. It doesn't tell that to the people that worked at those 300 stores that are now at 300 restaurants that are now out of a job and scrambling, looking for work, when we've got a saturation of restaurants everywhere.
And those people were given I remember seeing that. Hi, Middle, if you're listening to us here, we're referring to you.
You stuck the words out of my mouth.
I hope you're listening. But the thing is that the appearances to the workers, they were not given a clue. Now, if they saw that the head counts were going down to the customers, maybe they should have been wise and be looking around for alternatives. But
it was literally like Friday they left,
right.
And then Monday they said, "Oh, you're not opening up anymore."
Right.
Yeah.
And I assume, Mish, that this is the beginning of these kind of notices that are going to be coming out en masse.
Oh my gosh, this is the beginning. And I talked about this. This is another thing I got amazingly right. Back in December, I said, unemployment, this is as good as it gets. That unemployment then was 4.7, 4.8, and I said it's going to be 6 by the end of the year. Well, and that's another thing. People look at me, my God, no, Mish, it's not going to jump from 4.8 to 6. Well, it jumped to 5.1 and then fell back to 5. And people came out of the woodwork and then said, look, it's falling again already. Well, the next report had jumped to 5.5, and I'm expecting that it's going to be 6 by the end of the year.
Now that doesn't include all the self-employed that are now out of work, right?
Oh, exactly. That's the quote official government number. I think unemployment is actually way higher than that. The government reports come out, they list the official number, but then they also list, if you know how to find it, it's literally, it's buried 30 pages deep in some report in something called Table A12. Every month I look at Table A12, and if you scroll to the last line on that, they add back in the discouraged workers. They add back in the people that were on unemployment, used up all of their benefits, and now no longer have benefits. The government doesn't consider those people unemployed anymore if they roll off the rolls. The government doesn't count people that are working part-time but really want a full-time job. So someone that's working 10 hours a week and wants to work 40, that person's not counted unemployed either. If you add all of them up, and this is a government number, I'm not making this up, but the government adds this up, and it publishes that total in Table A12 at the very last line. And the number for last month, it said 9.9%. That is a more realistic definition.
Did you say
of
9.9?
what unemployment is. So if things feel bad,
Yeah.
to the average person. It's, my gosh, they're telling me that unemployment is 5 or 5.5%. I don't see it. It seems worse than that. Well, that's because it's double worse than what they're saying.
Did you
when
say
add all of these other things in there?
Hey, Mish, did you say 9.9%?
Yes, I did.
Wow. Well, now would that data include real estate agents that they're currently reporting?
No, that data would not include real estate
I'm assuming
agents.
there's probably been a slight increase in the unemployment of real estate agents.
Well, technically, they're still employed. They just don't have any income.
Well, that's different. Well, that must make them feel much better.
Well, exactly. And I think it's 1 out of 50 people in California were real estate agents at one point. That's how much things got in California. So it's no wonder. In California, the unemployment rate, by the way, is one of the highest in the nation. I don't want to say it wrong. I think it was 7.5, or something like that. Mm-hmm. The Michigan is really bad because of the manufacturing situation in Detroit, in Dayton, Ford, GM, and the auto parts places. Ohio, same story. Florida, a huge real estate bust. Actually, I think that we've got 3 states that are in a depression right now, and those states are Ohio, Michigan, and Florida, and I think California is rapidly heading there. That is those 4 states, something like 25% of the population in the United States. Now, this is to say the states in a depression. Well, not every part of the state is in a depression. There's still touristy areas that might be doing okay. But the local workers, the local people that are scrambling to find jobs, those jobs aren't there. Tourism is sinking in a lot of places. Who can afford to drive anymore or fly anymore and then rent a car and get to someplace? So people are vacationing closer to home. It's an interesting stat. We saw tent sales go up. People are buying tents. At least this is good from a family standpoint, doing some family camping closer to home rather than going on an elaborate vacation, eating out, and getting more obese, which is another problem the United States has.
Well, Mish, I have another data source that I'll have to track and get back with you about. Mrs. Future works at our church in something called Angel Food Ministries, which is a big national network of basically it's food preparation where they get food and pass out boxes of food for families to eat, and it's for everybody, not just people in immediate distress. But what I find is people are tightening their belt more and more. We're seeing more and more people going for these deals of discount food, pre-boxed, pre-selected food.
Well, what I thought was...
And that might be an indication, too, of what's going on.
What I thought was interesting was I also worked there at the Angel Food from time to time, and I was taking orders, and the low-income tags all had J.P. Morgan's name on the top of it. I thought that was interesting.
Do what?
Yeah, there were these little slips that you had to fill out, and at the top of the slip was J.P. Morgan food voucher. And
really?
I figured, gosh, I haven't tracked it down, but I figured, gosh, they got to be making a little bit of money off of that.
So they're processing it?
I think so, yeah.
Oh my God, this sounds like a tale of two cities.
We may have to ask Mrs. Future about that later.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
I bet she's probably got them.
What about the individual family? We've talked about, and I want to talk about some specific people soon. But
anybody in the service industry.
What about individual families? What have average families done to contribute their part? We've had a lot of people at the top mess us up. What have our own habits done to mess us up to where we are?
People were greedy. They fell for a scheme. They were, like I said, camping out overnight, and it's these things always happen. That's what marks the top of anything, and the bottom will be the reverse. It'll be sheer panic by everyone that sets the bottom.
But is this worse than in the past?
People contributed themselves. They took out what's called a liar loan. They went in and they said that just to get a house, they said that they were making $100,000 when really they were making $30,000, or they said that they were making $200,000 when they were really making $80,000, just to be able to buy a ridiculously expensive house somewhere that they couldn't afford. And they knew that they couldn't afford.
Right.
They knew that they weren't making that much money. They were a participant to fraud.